Welding and blacksmithing, they overlap a lot, but it can be confusing to know exactly what you need to get started. Today, I'm with Steve, who has taught hundreds of people how to get into blacksmithing.
Very happy to be here, thank you.
And we're gonna tell you the bare bones that you need to get blacksmithing today.
You know a gas saver? So if you run oxyacetylene all the time, it's a pilot light for the exact.
Hey,
look at you. What you can do is you can make a rig where you've got a foot pedal. This goes full on for the torch.
It's like a foot pedal for your torch.
It's a foot pedal for the torch. You can create a small forge out of this gas saving device. You need a nice rosebud tip in order to do that. It's laying flat like that, and then the rosebud sticks up. So then you just put your work on top over like that, and that's all you do. Now you got instant heat.
How much would this usually cost somebody?
It's like $80, $90, and then whatever time you invest, however system that you want to do is on you.
If you don't have oxy-fuel, what is the cheapest way of making a forge?
You can look up propane forges. There's some very cheap ones online, and I would go to your budget.
What's like an average propane forge gonna cost you?
I've seen them as cheap as $100.
It's $100.
Depends on what you want to do as far as your fuel usage.
You can get propane from a gas station, but you can't get oxy-fuel from a gas station. You primarily teach on is a coal forge out in the state park, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
The one thing about a coal forge is I can build a fire as big as I want. I could put whatever I want into that fire in my coal forge. With a propane forge, I am limited to the size of this forge. So that's the biggest limitation. Try to buy it maybe a little bit bigger than what you're going to do, because inevitably you're going to say, oh man, that forge is too small because now I'm making these little knives, and then you're like, oh, now I want to make a sword, now I want to make a this, now I want to make a that, and now I've got this little tiny forge. But what's nice about the coal forge is all I got to do is make a bigger fire.
How much does a coal forge typically cost?
It depends on if you want to fabricate it, which you're a welder.
You're already a welder, you can fabricate it.
And then you can find this stuff online. The biggest thing that you're probably going to have to invest is probably a fire pot and the blower to operate that. Maybe $300-400 for those two, a good one that would last you 20 or 30 years.
That's a long time.
It depends on how you take care of it too. You know, it's like driving a car.
So you've already invested a bunch of money into your welding workshop, so you got a bunch of tools. You might be thinking, how much am I gonna have to spend on tools? What are the basic tools that I'm gonna need to get started?
A lot of things you can do, fabricate old tools. The marketplace, that's an easy way to find older tools to modify it and make better tools. A twisting wrench, you can find an old flat jaw. You get a flat jaw so that it doesn't make a mark. And then what you do is you just weld on a handle, because when you're twisting, you don't want an ellipse. You want to be able to control exactly that. And I've had this for about 15, 20 years.
Longevity.
Longevity, that's what it's all about.
And speaking of twist, this is what we're talking about, but if you want to see me make a twist at Makers Camp last year, check out this video right there. As far as like holding my material, that seems pretty important. What do I need to get?
I've had these tongs for 30 years.
Is that why it has 30 on them?
That's 30 millimeters.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, nice though. This is a wolf jaw tongs. Here's the problem when you're starting out is I don't have the skill set to make that first set of tongs. What I originally did was bought my first set of tongs. I still have this set of tongs to this day, and I knew that I needed something that would hold most things. Wolf jaw tongs does that. 30, 40, and 50 millimeters. If I had to have one, I would get them in 40 millimeters, and that costs about $80.
$80.
They don't even move as far as slippage.
And that's after 30 years.
30 years. I haven't even had
Beating stuff with it all the time.
Yeah, don't even have to tighten the rivets. They're still that good.
Speaking of beating things while we're holding it, what kind of hammer do I need? Like, can I just use a regular hammer I get at the hardware store?
You could use a ball peen hammer. The back of the hammer, as we know, is the peen of the hammer. So that's where the ball peen comes from. You need that to set rivets, and if you want to do texture, to do some art, because I'm big on art. That's more of what I like. That's kind of my focus. You can do a lot of texturing. It's a cheap hammer to buy. You're going to need it to set rivets. If I only had to have 2 hammers as starting, that would be one of them. The second one is the cross peen. What the peen of this is designed to do is to
Put grooves.
but it also moves metal. So I would have this hammer as shaping and forging. This is a house-made product, and that's retails at $150.
So $150 for this one, and then we got this one. What do we think an average of this would be? Like 20 bucks?
Yeah, 20 bucks.
All right. You also have this wooden one. What necessarily would you be using this one for?
I have done maybe 30% of my forging with wooden mallets. So remember these twists that we've done, that you have made at makers camps?
Yes.
When you're done twisting it, you don't want to use a metal piece because you're going to damage it. You need to move it, bend it, or do whatever you want with it. You're going to need to hit it with wood. So you can get a rawhide mallet. You could break off a piece of wood. I used a branch, honest to God. I used a branch for my first 5 years of forging. So you don't need to buy a hammer.
$0.
$0.
You also told me we can use welpers. You
Yep.
already have these in the shop. These are good for doing little detailed bends and everything.
Yeah. Eventually you'll use some kind of scrolling pliers for the bigger work, but you can get away with that with small 1/8 inch work or 1/16.
How much would a set of those cost me?
85 to 100 depending on the make and model.
Stick to the welpers, friends. Stick
Right.
to the welpers.
You already have it.
What is this that you have?
This is a leg vise, a blacksmithing vise. So there's a spring in here. It opens it up like that. And then all you do is close it. This is a very good, strong machinist vise. But the weakness that this has is that the force goes straight down into the ground on this. So what this is designed to do is you can hammer on this thing all day and the transfer of energy goes down this leg into the ground. If I was to do that on this type of vise, I would ultimately damage it.
So you probably already have one of these in your shop. So you could stick with the free option, but if you wanted to go with this, how much do one of these bad boys go for?
You can find these on Marketplace for about $200, $250.
What's your passion?
Ornamental.
There's different types of ornamental blacksmithing we can do. This is probably your first step into it, like traditional blacksmithing.
Yes.
So to do things like that, what am I going to need to use?
This is the most amazing part because this is all found materials. These materials were coil springs from vehicles, and just over the time frame there, people would come up to me and say, "Hey Steve, I've got another coil spring from my Jeep, my this, my that." So I have a full collection of springs, leaf springs and other things, and they are all free.
And that's what you make your tools out of.
That is correct. I straighten them out, and then I cut them, and then I forged them, tempered them to the hardness after I wanted, and you could see where they're going to do what they needed to be right there. And then after I made it, now I have another tool to make another thing, so it keeps going and going and going, all for free.
Free 99. All right, so I just picked up this nice galvanized conduit. I can use this, right?
Absolutely not. That will give off a gas that will kill you. You have to be very careful when using found objects just to know what it is. Anything that has galvanized, do not use, do not heat it up. Use old rusty steel if you're going to use it. If you're going to use found objects, so do be careful what you're going to use when finding it.
What type of materials do you search for when you go to look for it?
Older rusty steel that I know that does not have galvanized on it, and I'm looking for things that do not have paint. You got to clean it and prep it if you're going to do something like that before just throwing it into the fire.
But I can use just regular carbon steel, or do I need to get tool steel?
No. I like to use just old mild steel, and that's the easier to forge. That's another thing when you're using found objects. Kind of know what you're getting into. I've called up the metallurgist to say, is this safe to use? And they're like, you're the first person that's ever called me up about that. Yeah, it's okay. Really be careful because there's molybdenum, there could be magnesium, there could be God knows what in those mixtures So you really got to be careful to know what that's all about.
Always a good idea to have ventilation, forced
Right.
ventilation of some kind when
Yeah.
you're working with metal,
Yeah.
or wearing a respirator, a PAPR system, anything like that is going to give you the best coverage for
Yeah.
sure. Students like that are just getting into metalworking and blacksmithing. Where do you tell them to go look for these found objects?
The junkyard is probably a good spot to do it. Once you start talking to your friends, it'll start feeding itself.
Yeah. It's amazing how many people have metal they want to get rid of.
Yeah, and being in a welding place too, having your shops.
You already have material on hand.
You've got all your material.
The most important thing I think people are going to ask, what do I need to hit it on?
The anvil.
So like this, I could probably find this pretty cheap on Marketplace, right?
Oh, goodness, no.
Come on, this thing's not that bad.
Yeah, anvils are thousands and thousands of dollars for a quality, good anvil, something like this.
Do I need an anvil to get started?
If we go back to the basic principle of a flat surface that we hit on a railroad tie, a piece of flat cast steel, not iron. If you went to Harbor Freight and you see that anvil for $100, that anvil's cast iron. It's gonna dent, it's gonna be useless.
All right, so if I don't need an anvil, what do I need to get?
Remember I said 30% of my forging was with that wooden mallet?
Well, you said it was with a branch.
The branch, you're right. But remember that we also talked about that wooden mallet? I'm gonna need something else that's flat like that. So I have a stump that I have for 30 years. It's so old, I don't know what kind of oak this thing is.
And how much did it cost you?
Furry.
So like an anvil like this one's probably not quite as expensive as this.
Correct.
Like if I found one of these like at a garage sale, would this be an interesting thing to start with, or
Absolutely.
how much would one of these usually cost somebody?
It depends. I've seen like $5-6 a pound.
Would you say that's the same as this anvil, is about that same price range?
No, that would be much more.
This would be, how much do you think this one would be?
I couldn't guess at that.
We're talking high end here.
Yeah. To me, that's worth its weight in gold, though. Like, the cast steel anvils are the way to go. What's beautiful about the cast steel is you can grind it down and resurface it. This, you're going to wear the plate down, and that's going to chip, crack.
Oh, we know. We did one last
did
year.
Okay.
It was a nightmare. So this is high end, bottom end, get a stump. So now you know this is the bare bones of what it's going to cost to get into blacksmithing. If someone is interested in taking blacksmithing courses, how can they work with you?
Calb Iron Works on Instagram and Facebook. You can come on out and just message me and we'll figure something out.
Until next time, we'll see you out there.